few MLB teams still want to win the World Series in 2022, and some have already started planning for 2023. The Oakland A's don't have any plans though. Even for 2023, they still don't have an official number yet, let alone for 2024. But most franchises already have at least one contract that'll probably make them groan as 2024 approaches. In this video, we'll talk about some of the worst upcoming MLB contracts. First off, the Washington Nationals, Texas Rangers, and Toronto Blue Jays. First, there's the Texas Rangers' Corey Seager. If there were worries that Altuve wasn't worth $29 million, then you can bet that there are worries that Seager isn't worth $31.5 million. Altuve at least has a job. He hits .307 and hasn't missed over 250 games in the last 5 seasons. It could be a bad idea even if Seager only gets $35 million in 2024. But if he gets another 7 years and $221.5 million after that, that's a real mess. Then there's the Toronto Blue Jays' Jose Berrios. This past offseason, that 7-year, $131 million deal seemed like a good idea, but Berrios went out and gave up more hits and earned runs than any other AL pitcher in 2022. Now it feels like a contract from a nightmare. Lastly, Strasburg from the Nationals of Washington. Strasburg hasn't been worth even close to $35 million per year for the past 3 years, but Washington still has to pay for him for another 4. It feels like Strasburg's career's pretty much over. Up next, the Tampa Bay Rays, Seattle Mariners, and St. Louis Cardinals. Robbie Ray from the Seattle Mariners, the first one. Ray's first year in Seattle was full of ups and downs. He had a 4.97 ERA in his first 12 starts, but then he went on to have a 2.27 ERA in his next 15 games. He sputtered to the end of the season before having a terrible start in the playoffs. Then St. Louis Cardinals' Steven Matz. Matz has never had a whip of less than 1.20, and since the beginning of 2017, his B-WAR's been only 3.8. It's hard to believe that his seasons at age 33 or 34 will be worth 8 figures. And Tyler Glasnow from Tampa Bay Rays. In 2023, he'll make $5.35 million. In 2024, he'll make $25 million, which is crazy. It's also unheard of for Tampa Bay to pay $25 million for one player for 1 year, followed by the Giants, Pittsburgh Pirates, and the San Diego Padres. The first is Pittsburgh Pirates' Brian Hayes. If he became a free agent this offseason, he'd surely get more money than this on the open market. But it's the only contract Pittsburgh has after this season, so it's by definition the worst thing that could happen. Then Fernando Tatis Jr. of the San Diego Padres hit a home run. On the other hand, Tatis' 14-year, $340 million contract quickly went from looking like an excellent investment to a disaster that could kill the team. Many of us wonder if the Padres could do anything to get out of the many years left on his contract after he was banned for 80 games for using drugs to help him play better. Last, San Francisco Giants' Anthony DeSclafani. Compared to many other contracts on this list, DeSclafani's contract isn't a big deal since he hurt his ankle and missed most of the season. Moving on to the Phillies and the Yankees. First, we've got Giancarlo Stanton of the New York Yankees. Stanton's 13-year, $325 million contract was always hard on him in the end, but he's already almost nothing like the player they traded for 5 years ago. And then there's Nick Castellanos from the Philadelphia Phillies. Not to worry about Castellanos' defense. It's terrible, and it's always been that way. The Phillies signed him to be their DH, and they had to play him every day in the right field. But you've got to be worried when the guy you signed to be your DH has the worst slugging and OPS numbers of his career as a regular MLB player. That too in the first year of a 5-year, $100 million deal. Next, the Mets, the Brewers, and the Minnesota Twins. First, Christian Yelich from Milwaukee Brewers. It feels like Yelich was finally back to his old self, the guy who won one NL MVP and almost won another before breaking his kneecap on a foul ball. And they still have to pay someone who turns 31 this offseason $26 million a year for the next 6 seasons. Only then did the Minnesota Twins' Byron Buxton hit a home run. Even though it would be worth it if he could do it, this seems like a bad contract because the injury-prone star has only made 1,160 plate appearances in the last 5 seasons. Francisco Lindor of the New York Mets came in last. As with Corey Seager at Texas, the idea of paying a middle infielder more than $30 million a year until he's 37 is just plain scary. Not to mention Los Angeles Angels, Dodgers, and Miami Marlins. First, Anthony Rendon from Los Angeles Angels. Rendon's contract says that the last 3 years can't go much worse than the first three. If he finally gets healthy and even comes close to what he did for the Washington Nationals from 2017 to 2019, he could be worth this enormous sum of money. Then Chris Taylor of the Los Angeles Dodgers. In the last few years of Mookie Betts' $365 million 12-year contract could be a little rough, but $35 million at age 35 in 2028, $32.5 million at age 39 in 2032. We'll find out. Avisail Garcia from the Miami Marlins was the last one. In 2022, he was one of the worst hitters in the major leagues. Things will only worsen as this 2017 All-Star, who's never been nominated for MVP, gets older. Let's learn more about Kansas Royals, Detroit Tigers, and Houston Astros. First, Javier Baez from Detroit Tigers. Either Baez gets better after a rough first year in Detroit and leaves the rest of this deal to make more money elsewhere, or he stays in Detroit and has another bad year. Then the Houston Astros' Jose Altuve with his home run. If any deal were to go wrong, it'd probably be Altuve not living up to the value of the last year of his 7-year, $163.5 million deal. Salvador Perez from the Kansas City Royals came in last. The Royals gave Perez a 4-year, $82 million contract extension right before he led the major leagues in home runs. Even if he follows in the footsteps of Joe Mauer or Buster Posey and starts playing first base and designated hitter, the nearly 10,000 innings he's played as a catcher won't go away. Coming up, it's all the C teams. First, Cincinnati Reds' Joey Votto. The Reds, who are also rebuilding, have even fewer options than the Cubs. Votto did an excellent job for the Reds for a long time, but he'll be 40 in September, and in 2022 his batting average, on-base percentage, and slugging all the worst of his career. Then Miles Straw from the Cleveland Guardians. The outfielder will turn 28, so he should still have a few good years ahead. But when his salary goes up to $7.4 million in 2026, he might not be worth that much anymore. And we have Chris Bryant of the Colorado Rockies. He won't be worth this much money unless he can do something similar for all 6 months of the season for the next 6 seasons. Next, Chicago White Sox, Cubs, and Boston Red Sox. First, Boston Red Sox's Chris Sale. He couldn't get a deal that pays more or lasts longer. Boston just needs to hope that he stays healthy in his 35th season. Chicago Cubs pitcher Marcus Stroman came in. If Stroman's good enough in 2023 to be worth $21 million in 2024, he'll opt out and try to get a multi-year deal. He'll either go elsewhere or cost the Cubs more to keep him. Yohan Moncada from the Chicago White Sox is also here. He had an excellent glove at third base this season, but his contract is getting worse. Finally, the last 3 teams. First, Arizona Diamondbacks' Kettle Marte. Marte hit .240 for 2022, and in his last 49 games, he only had 2 home runs and 1 stolen base. Even his gloves also stopped being used in the last 2 years. Then Marcell Ozuna of the Atlanta Braves came up. Ozuna's problems off the field are bad enough to make this a terrible deal. Even though the outfielder hit at least 23 home runs this season, it seems unlikely they'll still want him around in 2 years. We also have Chris Davis, who plays for the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles are paying Davis $17 million for 2022, even though he hasn't played since 2020. Now comes the 15-year, $42 million deferred portion of the 7-year, $161 million deal he signed before the 2016 season, and it's going to be a nightmare. And on that note, that's a wrap for this video. Which of these contracts is the worst? Do you think any of these players stand a chance of getting a better deal? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you at the next one.